Yo,
Hello, hello.
my God, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I am warm. How about yourself? I hope the weather's treating you nice on that side of the country.
Dude, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm actually going to, yeah, I think we're live actually. So, because you know how like people do interviews and then they're like, oh, let's stage it. But no, I think we're live. So don't say
Raw
anything
and uncut.
uncut, man. So don't say anything, you're gonna regret. But we can always edit it out. But
Mhm.
how's everything, man? How's the family, dude? How's the family? How's the new job?
We are busy in the best way, so I cannot complain one bit. It's nice to have my life back and to be somewhere professionally where I'm feeling fulfilled. And
Yeah,
my son, he's growing like a weed.
yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah.
getting to that age and size where he wants to be carried still, but it's getting harder for me. So I got to keep up with him. I got to
How
start hitting the gym.
how old is he now?
He's about to be 5 in November.
Woo, it's getting up
So
there,
it's
man.
he's in school already. So we're doing like school stuff. He's in activities. So he's like no longer a baby anymore.
Yeah,
So it's interesting to
yeah, yeah,
watch
yeah.
that phase of his life.
I'm sure that plus the new job plus everything else is a little stressful, but you always seem to handle stress well, so I'm not surprised you're dealing. You still going to the gym though?
Nah, that's the one thing I gotta pick back up. So I actually started physical therapy
Yeah,
this week, and it's been really good because they kind of just know exactly what you need to do to hit those areas that you
yeah,
don't really can't really get on your own. So it's kind of like ironically enough ties back to why I signed up with you. It's like I could
yeah,
spend all this time figuring out what I need to learn. I'll just work with the pros and they'll tell me just do this every day.
yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. And the pain was already gone.
What's the injury?
Not really an injury, it's more so like chronic pain, right? Just from having a desk job and of course being remote, like shifting to remote even prior to COVID. I've been working remote since 2017 and just being more sedentary has kind of set in like some
Yeah,
repetitive stress injuries just with the shoulder, just like being, like this all day, reaching forward with the right arm and just sitting a lot has just made it more difficult. And I'm playing softball now. Like talk about
ooh,
being busy, right? On top of that, I'm like in two softball leagues, and that's like my me time. So I realized that if I actually want to have fun doing athletics, I gotta be in shape. So
what? All right, let me ask you this before we kind of jump into it, because it's something that my mentors tell me a lot about, and I think it's like actually relevant to doing a better job at your work and all this. But how many steps are you getting per day?
not enough. I actually lost my tracker. I would say probably like between 5 and 6,
Okay,
which is not good.
because you can always check the hard app. Like you can if you have an
Yeah.
phone, you can always like check the health app thing.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, try to get 15, man. Try to get 15.
Yeah,
15,000.
15 is a good number. 'Cause I actually have to reach for that. Like,
Yeah.
it's not enough to walk around the house unless I want to walk in circles like the guy from The Shining. I actually have to get outside and go somewhere where I have to
Yeah.
walk and come back.
I thought about getting like a walking desk. Because it's actually surprisingly like kind of cheap. I think you can get one for like less than $100, I think. But
Mhm.
the other thing, and I don't know, because you're probably still coding, right? So I don't know if you have the liberty, but like I'll try to do as many meetings as I can while I'm on a walk, right? Because then
Yeah.
it kind of doesn't feel like work, and next thing you know, you walked an extra 5,000 steps that day. Um, Highly recommend it because that's the stuff that's gonna hurt, man. Just the little hips just tightening up from sitting so much. That's the
Mhm.
stuff that really hurts. But um, so we'll see. But you'll get back. You'll go back to it. I'm not too worried there.
Yeah. And part of it, in regards to being so busy is really time blocking stuff for you, right? So when I was younger, especially being part of a startup, I had the mindset of I'm going to work until I get this stuff done. And even if I'm doing something inefficiently, like I got the time, right? I don't have any kids. I'm not
Right.
married. If I have to stay here until 9 to get it done, I will.
Right.
And part of being like a high functioning busy person is to be able to work efficiently and basically like put a constraint on yourself and say
Yeah.
like get this done in an hour. Don't spend
Yep.
6 hours doing this.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
that's where the innovation comes.
Read the book Deep Work if you haven't already. Deep Work
Yeah,
is a really, really, really good one.
I'm gonna write that down
Yeah,
now before I forget.
yeah. The idea of like a 4 hour work week is kind of, in my opinion, a scam, but like a 4 hour work day makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense because like after 4 hours of work, I'm sure by like 12 or 1, you're already starting to feel woozy and tired. So if you can
Mm,
do all your important work in the morning, that's kind of the best thing you can do, and then kind of do like small work after afternoon. But we can
yeah.
go on a tangent there, so I'll spare you that life lesson. But well, listen, thank you for hopping on this call. This is really I've done this a few times now with a few alumni, but basically it's just for me to catch up, see how you're doing, see how it can help, but then also kind of so that other prospect looking to get into this program can really understand like the journey. And so I'll kind of just take you from beginning to end, kind of see, kind of hear your story because I know that you had a semi background in tech, and
Mm,
I know that you were also going through your own like a different boot camp and everything. And so
yeah.
why don't you, yeah, give the audience a little introduction.
All right. I'll try to keep this to under 20 minutes. One of the things that I learned from you is that brevity is key, right? And so, long story
How long
short,
was your testimonial, by the way?
it was 15 and I was sick. Like I really wasn't up for it, but I just kind of got rolling. I
Well,
kind of want to get a redo of that one and give you a shorter TED talk.
before we get started, then what is do you remember the one biggest lesson I gave you towards the end, like right before you got your job? What was the main lesson I gave you there? Like, what was the round that you kept failing at?
It was, God, I don't know. I mean, it was a behavioral for
Yeah.
sure. And I don't remember the tagline. I just remember a
Well,
minute or
you
less.
made me laugh because I remember we were like reviewing one of your behaviorals, and I had asked you like, hey, like take a look at your own behavioral questions recording and let me know what you think. And you slack me. You're like, dude, it looks like there's a gun to my head. Like, what is going on?
I was being held hostage. I
Yeah,
was trying to remember the script, so to
yeah.
speak, and I realized that that's
But
just
then you
not the
got
way.
the job on the next one, and that's
Yeah.
I think was a powerful lesson of just like, okay, we just dig in and have somebody else look at like what's going on, and then you can fix it. But
Hmm.
anyways, I'll stop talking. Like, what's yeah, tell the audience a little bit about your background.
So yeah, essentially, I graduated from college with a degree in sociology. I had a good foundation in tech even back then. I took computer science and engineering. I just never really finished the degrees, but I had always had that background and that interest in tech. And I graduated from college with a degree in sociology. Didn't really have a plan per se. I ended up finding a job where I had already interned at a bank, and I did that for about a year and a half. Towards the tail end of that tenure, I started actually looking for something that I might be interested in, tied to both like what I studied and also something that I genuinely wanted to do. And I found Trust Metrics, which was a startup at the time. And to be honest, wasn't really something that I thought was going to be like a 10-year journey for me there, but it was a step, right? It was a small company, chance for impact. Throughout the years, I started out working on a really cool tech on machine learning before it was cool. So it was kind of cutting edge at the time. We had very big ideas, but there was just a lot of work to be done to implement it technically. So I started from the ground up there basically and worked my way up to essentially like building out like a data warehouse near the end, going from just a person that was just feeding a machine learning algorithm A, B to
Yeah,
running the entire data as a product,
yeah.
learning the product from the ground up and then managing the data
How
and
long were you there?
implementing it. I was there for 10 years up until
You were there for 10
2022.
years. How did we
So
meet then?
we met. So I bought your book, right? I
Ah,
bought
got
your
it.
book and you reached out. And no shade against you or authors in general, but usually when authors reach out, you just don't expect to hear back,
Yeah,
right?
Right.
People are busy. I mean, it is what it is,
Yeah.
right? And so I just remember he responded like 4 hours later with like a
Wow.
paragraph, and I was like, oh wow, like
Yeah.
he's a real person, and that I think that's where the journey started from there. I was already at my next job after actually two jobs after Trust Metrics, right? But I had my eye towards like growing technically, like building on the foundation that I built at Trust Metrics, and then supplemented some of that with like a full stack analytics bootcamp where I got exposed to a lot more outside of the scope of my previous job. I ended up moving out of the contract job that I had into the company that I was at prior.
Right.
And while I was there, I was exploring just like upskilling. I had, a data analyst job. It was at an industry completely separate from my first job. So I always prided myself as somebody who could just figure it out on the fly, right?
Yeah.
As I was learning, right? So I wasn't really married to like, I have to be in biotech, I have to be in finance, I have to be in this and that. I was always interested in places that had interesting problems to
Yeah.
solve.
Yeah.
So yeah, while I was there was when I bought your book because I was looking to take that step into really diving deep into the technical
Yeah.
side of data analytics and move up into engineering.
Right. I remember that. You were excited. You were excited. You were absorbing everything from me, from that other boot camp, from YouTube videos. You were like, I just want to learn, get to the next
Yeah,
level. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was in some a free boot camp before I joined your program, which is just basically just like a guided project, and it was cool. I learned a lot, but I also realized that it's like I wish I had a good analogy before this call. Um, but it's like for example, like if you're learning how to coach football, and for some reason, like you get a chance to shadow Andy Reid and the Chiefs in the playoffs, right? That's kind of
Right.
like the level of complexity that I was doing that boot camp at. We were like deploying like Docker containers and running orchestrations and basically just like skipping all the steps
Right.
right to the end. And it was very
Right.
good to understand like, well, what play should we run here if the defense is showing that, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't have the fundamentals in place. So I just found myself at like 3 in the morning, like debugging Docker container builds. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I'm just going back to that previous point of like, where's your time going, right? And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
kid's over there sleeping. My wife is like, what's this guy up to? Like, and
Right.
I'm over here just like plugging away at code that
Right.
I barely understand.
Yeah. How
But it
much?
was a good learning experience, even that.
Yeah. How much is your time worth, kind of thing. I think I'm a believer that there's a space for all of it. You know, there's a space for free stuff, for $10 stuff, for $10,000 stuff, for $100,000 stuff. There's a time and place for every a product for every person, depending on where they are. But um,
Mhm,
once we started working together, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, what was your, obviously we've evolved since the last time you were in this. It,
mhm.
it might it might be a year at this point, but it's been a while. But
Yeah.
what was your favorite part? What was your best takeaway? What was your least favorite part? Because I always kind of like to a get feedback from me, and that way the audience can also see like, hey, I'm worried about the best parts. I'm worried about the worst parts too. Um, but yeah, I'm curious to hear these two, even though I know it's been, almost a year at this point.
I'll start with the least favorite, and I've reflected on this a lot, especially given where the job market is compared to back then,
Mm.
right? Um, you have a playbook for how to understand leverage, what cards you have to play when you have an offer, and how to manage that process.
Right.
And I was in a situation where I was going by your playbook, but I also was kind of wrapped into the idea that the other like offers were coming, right?
Yeah.
Like we always had that window of like, all right, like I
Yeah.
have a lot of prospects, and thanks to you, I was able to have
Right.
cards to play, right? Like I had a lot of ongoing job interviews,
Yeah.
and I for some reason assumed that that offer was going to come, and it
Yeah.
never came, and so I mishandled a
Yeah.
a process where I could have brought money to the table
Yeah.
to my
Yeah.
family while I was searching,
The
and that
contract job, right?
went away. Yeah, and that was a
Yeah,
very big mistake. And when I look
yeah,
back, I realized that thankfully we had like enough in savings where we absorbed
yeah,
it, but it was a
yeah.
gigantic mistake. So that's something
Yeah.
that I would go back and redo.
We learn from that one too. We tell people now, like, listen, if you're like without a job, just take it, and then we can
Yeah,
find the next one. It's not a one or zero. So especially with contract jobs, because they don't like to negotiate if they put the dollar amount in the job description. That's something we
hmm
learned. Yeah. So glad it worked out, but yeah, you definitely went through it for sure.
yeah. Now, again, that was I was coming from a position of privilege there because if that fell through, we still had cash and savings. My wife makes more than enough to handle like our day to day. So I was fortunate, but that is good advice for anyone
Yeah.
in those shoes is just take it, right? And
Yeah.
you might want to practice negotiating still, but like also they kind of gave me a couple chances to
Yeah.
rein it back in, and I just
Yeah.
kept going, and then they just said no thanks. So it was good practice either way. I mean,
Yeah.
not really like that regretful. I mean, the best part for me just to get that was like the one negative thing,
Yeah.
right? Like the
Good.
positive for me was just the mindset shift and the constant period of it was like I called it like a discomfort, but in a controlled way. Like it wasn't something that I was felt like overwhelmed by, but your process really took me to a place that I wouldn't have gone to myself. I always felt like someone like the first time I reached out to a recruiter, even when you told me like you got to reach out to the recruiter right after you apply, I just felt not icky
Yeah.
about it, but I just didn't feel comfortable doing
Yeah.
it. And I just not something that I normally did or advocating for yourself, right? And being persistent, right? Like not feeling like you're imposing, but looking at it as a you're trying to stand out in a rat race, right?
Right.
So you're trying to grab their attention and again push your way in, especially in a competitive market, and
Yeah.
also just learning to value my previous contributions. So actually doing the resume review, looking at my resume and basically just like tearing it up
Right.
building it up from scratch was surprisingly frustrating for me because I had to really like rethink how I viewed myself and how I valued my own work.
Yeah.
So literally quantifying the impact that your work had on the business for me was not a way that I viewed how I worked before. And so
Was
that
there a
was
line, was there a
hard.
specific line in the resume that you remember, the one that stands out to you? One that maybe you looked at and you were like, holy crap, I had that impact on the business and I never thought about it that way. Is there a line that stood out to you?
I think the easy one, again, being at a startup, these situations just you can't avoid them.
Right.
With impact, I mean, back at Trust Metrics, we basically had like 6 months to live because COVID came and our business, our cash intake basically dried up, right?
Yeah.
And we had all this server costs. We were running a lot of stuff on AWS, and I got I basically had like, here are the numbers. This is how much we have left. Can you figure something out in
Yeah.
6 months? And so I had to get something in place that would work. Thankfully, we had an engineer there to kind of bounce ideas off of, just like the wireframing of that. I had to implement it, and then I was able to literally see the bill, see how much we were spending, see how much money we
Yeah.
had left, and the impact, right? And it was millions of dollars. I mean, that was in 2020, and my company went on until the end of 2022. So I bought
Right.
us 2 years just
Yeah.
by doing that.
And you talked
So
about
it
that
was,
during the interviews too, right?
yeah, that was a big one for me. And then another story that was really impactful was one where I tied my analysis. One, I was able to build a pipeline, right? So able to flex my data engineering skills, but also tie that to actual like operational efficiency and
Right.
bringing value to a director, right? And so I was in charge of building these metrics. This was in Amherst, and so we figured out a way to tie. um, give them visibility into something that they didn't have before based on like how certain markets were operating inefficiently. We gave them visibility to that, and that story really got a lot of traction in my behaviorals just because that's what they're looking for, right?
Yeah.
And so they're looking for initiative, leadership, and kind of above and beyond, not just like being waiting to be told what the problem is, identifying the problem
Yeah.
as you're going along through work, figuring out who the stakeholders are and what their incentives are, and then building something to accomplish that.
Yeah, so one of my employees said this beautifully. They were like, part of what we do and part of what you just described is like it's marketing and sales, right? You're marketing your resumes and you're selling yourself on the interview. Because a
Mm,
lot of people they worry about they major in minors, right? They're worrying about, well, what about this AWS tool? What about that? And I'm like, that's the easy stuff. That takes you
mm,
5 days to learn, head down 3 in the morning, right? Blah, blah, blah. It's how do you actually sell yourself that I think, you know, you did such a good job of getting there when you realize like, oh, that's the thing I've been missing the whole time. And you were
mm.
really good at like head down, like let's do these behavioral mocks, put the recordings in place, seeing yourself held hostage, right? All that
Yeah.
stuff is what led you to get there. So talk to me then, where are you now? How you liking it? What's next? What's next in your career?
So I am at DataSite, which is a company that builds cloud software for mergers and acquisitions. They're essentially called virtual deal rooms, right? And my job there is technically I'm in data engineering, so I was hired as an analyst, but the role revolved more around the analytics engineering, data engineering, actually. And so it basically was a blessing in disguise because I applied to this company just like any other company. I ended up getting an interview using your persistence method, right? I just kept emailing
Yeah,
them until somebody
cool.
called me back. And I found a company that was growing in during a quote unquote corporate recession, right? Because
Yeah,
of their business, right? The M&A market is I'm going to say it's recession proof, but it doesn't go with the ebbs and flows of the interest rates or with other companies. So
yeah,
they were actually looking to build their analytics organization, and they took interest in me. They saw that I was a fit with their culture, right? They're remote friendly, right? They're based out of Minnesota. The work that they do is super interesting and very challenging because we're a global company, so we have a very complex like data warehouse system that's regionalized. And so it was basically the perfect storm of where I'm at in my career and a place that values internal growth for their employees. Very laid back atmosphere, but also lots of talented people. Challenging, but also like forgiving, right? Like they're not
yeah.
going to just throw you into the fire right away. And honestly, I don't see myself like leaving
Good.
anytime soon. It's just a perfect fit for
And
me
you're
at the
surrounded by
time.
other engineers, right? Like other data engineers, software engineers, like people that you're learning from, right?
Every day. I
Good.
mean, I, I when I opened their DBT project, I realized like what I was in for there. They have about like more than 100 models. So it's like a
Yeah.
giant web. So it was like,
Yep.
all right, like I'm right where I need to be because if I could figure this out, then I'm in good shape.
And you prepared well for that. Yep, exactly. That's the
Mm,
best scenario, man. Because when prospects come to us, that's their biggest pain point. It's like I'm stuck at this job at this company where I just don't have people to learn from, right? Don't have projects that are like DBT. Like DBT is still new, man. That's still like two,
mm,
3 years old. It's still a very, very up and coming tool. So good, man. It sounds like you're at a good place and upward trajectory, right? That's what matters. The trend. Um,
yeah.
Cool, man. Um, what else? What else, I guess, from your perspective, would you, um, I guess, tell prospects, the audience, anybody kind of looking to up level their career? Not necessarily with us, but just like in general, because I think you tapped into something that I've like been thinking about more and more recently. You've tapped into the mindset piece. And I think that
Mindset is number one.
Yeah, but you came in with a decent mindset already, you know. Like I'd say you were already like a 7, 8 out of 10. You just brought it up to a 10. But we
Mhm.
talk to people that are like a 2 or 3 every day, you know, in terms of like there's no way this works, blah blah blah. Like what? I'm curious what you would say. Like what's your best advice?
I will say this: take inventory of what you view as positive or negative, and realize that even something negative that happens in your job search can be viewed as a positive, right? And so you can desensitize yourself to an unfair interview process, or getting ghosted, or even getting a rejection, right? So getting a rejection, I went from getting sad whenever I saw rejection to getting excited, because you shifted my mindset into just adding it as feedback,
Yeah,
right? So if you view these interactions as feedback,
right.
positive or negative, even bombing a job interview, or going through uh, a project where you spend 15 hours on it and then it doesn't even get looked at, right? Like this is all feedback that you take for the future, right? And how you want your job experience to go. You always want to be learning, and you want to take anything that you can. And I quantified it. So it helped me to look at the numbers. And even looking at rejections, I would get excited when I got a rejection email, like after just having seen them long enough, because it was like, good, I got that means
Dude,
somebody saw it.
I'll tell you something, man. You one of the benefits that we have now is that we apply on behalf of our clients. So I have a whole team that's like
Mm-hmm.
going out and applying. And I think we started doing this towards the end of your time here, but you were still applying for your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, so whether this is a good thing or bad thing for you to hear, like you were kind of the person that made us realize like, oh, like we got a lot of value for clients here if we just apply on their behalf. And so now we do that because to
Yeah.
your point, it was like, A, it was very time consuming, but B, that mindset still needs to happen, right? Because like it all depends, right? If you're breaking into the industry, you might have to apply to 500 jobs to get an offer, right? Like that's kind of the reality.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a little more established, there's other ways, reaching out to recruiters, connections, referrals, alumni, etc., right? But yeah, to kind of have like, whatever your interview rate was, 5, 10%, right? It's kind of like, okay, well, you just need to apply to 10 more to get one more interview. It's not that big.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like when you change that mindset, it's like stop worrying about the 9 you didn't get and just do an extra one and get to 10. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, so it's interesting, man. It's interesting. Um, I guess anything else you want to share? And of course, anything you need from me, my community, anything you would like to see next, because I'm always kind of thinking like, oh, like how can I, work with my alumni again? Because any alumni I feel like is always a good like I always like getting in touch with them again because they
Mm-hmm.
always grow and I like to see how they grow. So yeah, anything top of mind before we go?
I think that the way that you approach your program, it's different in the sense that you feel like I feel like you're invested in my success. Part of that is by design. One of the things that I tell people when they ask about the program is that they'll stick with you until you're happy. And you might have to take a job that's not the ideal next step. They'll
Right.
ask you.
Yeah.
And if you're
Yeah.
not happy with that step, they'll stick with you until you are. And that's rare. That's
Right.
rare in this industry, especially with the investment that you make into the program. And so
Mm.
just knowing that you care about the outcome of every candidate, to me is very important, and it's something that I
Wow.
like to highlight. And it's nice to know that you're part of a community. So I think that's what we're building here. One of the things that I'm trying to do more of in the midst of this busy season is to continue networking, right?
Yeah.
And get ahead of the next step. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to go to a different company. I'm very happy where I'm at, but there's
Right.
always chances for me to
Of
bring
course.
people in that I think are qualified. But then it's also like you're laying out that you're building that tribe for the next 5 years down the line. And that's
Exactly.
something that I didn't do before.
Exactly.
I'm
Like no
trying to
matter
do
what
more of that.
happens, you always have a community to come back to,
Yeah.
and a growth as well. And I've thought about it too. I thought about hitting my alumni and being like, do you want to create like a module or something, right? Because I'm sure that you're getting experience that at some point it's like, oh, like, you're working with the tool that we haven't worked with yet, and so continue building on it, I think would be cool. Um, but yeah, man. Well, I appreciate it, man. Uh,
Yes.
I appreciate the time. I'm glad to hear everything's going well. Um, Let me know if you ever need anything, man. I know you were a big fan of like asking me for book recommendations too while you were going through the
Mm,
program. So continue at it, especially if you ever feel like there's some trouble, with like, hey, I can't focus here, or your shoulder, or your PT. Let me know and I'll see how I can help, man. But
yeah.
uh, as
Thank you.
always, it was a pleasure seeing you again, and tell your family I said hi. Okay,
Likewise. Thanks
later,
for
buddy.
everything.